Welcome to Change My Movie Mind, brought to you by Jay from Film Strip Podcast.
And Anthony from Tis Podcast. Each show, Jay and I will debate a movie-related topic and attempt to change the other's mind.
We'll have a guest judge each episode to moderate and ultimately decide who should change their movie mind.
All you have to do to enjoy is subscribe to either show, Tis the Podcast or Film Strip Podcast, wherever you find podcasts.
Hey, subscribe to both shows while you're at it and get ready to change my movie mind.
Welcome to Film Strip. These podcasts are spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes of the films in review. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504(c)(2), Title 17.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay.
And I'm Nick.
And we're here to talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, or however you want to say it. Either way, the chainsaw's put together, and I just learned that this movie has a weird connection to The Breakfast Club that we're going to talk about in a minute. This original sequel, starring Dennis Hopper, Caroline Williams, Bill Johnson, Bill Moseley, Jim Seidow, directed by Tobe Hooper again. This one was released in 1986 on a $4.5 million budget by Golan and Globus. So we've done several of their things in the oeuvre here on Film Strip. Only made $8 million at the box office, but was considered a cult, has gained a real cult status through the years. And we'll talk about it here, but, you know, horror had gotten big in the 80s. And you know, through all the franchises that we named up last time. And you had Halloween, really Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street were carrying that. And then a couple years before Hellraiser started doing it. And so the rights to this movie had bounced around. They were going to do something, and Golan and Globus got a hold of it, and they wanted to do a horror movie because they were known for their action movies, their ninja movies and shit like that. They wanted to do a horror movie, and Tobe Hooper's like, well, I mean, he's the original Rob Zombie. You know, if you're going to ruin my creation, let me come do it for you. And he and Kit Carson concocted this as a dark comedy. And we talked about how much of the last one had a lot of humor in it anyway. Mm-hmm. And this one definitely steers hard into that lane, Nick.
Yeah, you can just tell from the opening scene that this is not the same movie.
No.
Not the same aesthetic. I mean, can you name any other sequels that are just so different than their first one that just went completely different direction? Because you could sit there and, like, that first one's Grindhouse. That's a Grindhouse movie. Mm-hmm. And this movie is 80s cheese, excess, you know, whatever you want to call it. It's almost like if you would look at Return of the Living Dead as a sequel to Night of the Living Dead, just how it went from Grindhouse black and white grungy to like kind of like this.
Yeah, it's
done better, not to kind of like, you know, raise my hand here, but
well, horror comedies had gotten big in the 80s though too. We got like Gremlins and Fright Night and, you know, those kind of movies and Terrorvision, yes, thank you very much, in the archives. This is one of your first episodes, by the way. So
one of my best.
Yeah, so you go back and listen to that, folks, if for nothing more than to hear Nick's plot summary from the point of the monster in that. It's gold. Podcast gold.
It was my first and last plot summary. I don't know why.
It wasn't your last one. You did those alien ones too.
Okay,
but anyway, but
it's been like a decade, man. Cut me some slack.
Yeah, we've been on the show a long time. But this one, though, again, very different completely. And I remember seeing this in the video store for years. And I didn't watch it until like the mid-2000s when I did a marathon of these. Because I always looked at the poster of it, which the main poster or the box art is what I would have called it at the time. And you've got this corpse laying on the ground, these people just kind of propped up, Leatherface's got his fist in the air, and I'm going, this looks like a joke. I'm not watching this. And now you tell me this time, you blew my mind with this right before we started recording.
Yeah, it's the Breakfast Club poster just done with the characters from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'm just like shocked You didn't know that. Like, it's so obvious.
Of all the things I know about The Breakfast Club, I know nothing about the way the poster looked. I really don't.
Oh, that's a classic poster. I mean, come on. You got, Judge, was it Judge
Nelson?
Yeah, Judd Nelson in the back.
Yeah, not Judge Reinhold. Different persons.
It's whatever it is.
Different yuppie from the 80s.
They're all the same to me.
Well, they were both in St. Almost Fire. We talked about that.
Oh, God. We did talk about that movie, didn't we?
That was your idea, too. So, but yeah, I mean, this is an interesting way of doing this because, again, you got Golan and Globus, which are, I mean, go watch the documentary that was about them, Electric Boogaloo. I mean, it's a fantastic story, and Ron's told a lot of it. He's written a lot about it on Den of Geek. You should check that out. And their movies have an audience. People love them. I love them for what they are. It's just the kitsch. But when they try to do things that are outside of their wheelhouse, and by that I mean action, it always goes hilariously bad. Like, they do the dance movies with the breaking movies, and those movies are fun, but they're fun because they're awful. And then you get this movie, which is just bug nuts crazy. And I didn't see this until, about maybe 10, 12 years ago, and had no idea what it was about. I had heard like it was a more comedic take, but newsflash, I'm not a huge Dennis Hopper fan. It's nothing against him. I think he's one of our finest actors, but I just never dug his thing. And 80s Dennis Hopper is a level of coked out that, like, I don't even know that I can explain to people if you haven't seen this movie.
Yeah, and even kind of when we're talking about like the whole sequel thing, I guess this is kind of reminding me a little bit of the Evil Dead series. Have you ever seen the first and second movie there?
Yeah, good point.
How it completely went from grindhouse to, horror comedy or whatever here. But
Sam Raimi's always had a tongue-in-cheek approach to everything. Though.
He has, definitely has. But yeah, I mean, for me, you're talking about the first time you've seen it. I just saw it the other day. Wow. I have never seen this movie before.
But you knew the poster was from The Breakfast Club.
I saw it at the, I was a child that hung out a lot at the, the Mon Pa, video rental
Finally,
place.
I've said for years that you are the Randall from Clerks on the film strip, and now I have proof.
those are like my fond childhood memories, was like just going over to do was Gem Photo. That was what it was called. It was a video and a film development place. And yeah, I remember going there as a kid and just going and walking around and looking at like all the, the weird VHS stuff. Cause you would have like genre sections, for the younger audiences there. You'd have your new releases that would be all on the wall. And then you'd have like your little genre section. You have your suspense, you have your drama, you have your thriller, you have your horror, you have your sci-fi. And then way in the back, you had a curtain, which you weren't allowed to go to unless you're over 18. But yeah, that was just kind of the way those were done. And I remember I always used to go to the horror section because, again, a really cool thing to do. Google like 80s VHS horror covers or slips or whatever you want to call it. They were works of art back then. They don't do movie stuff like they did back then. And this was one I always used to see. And like I said, I always kind of knew the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I never saw it. But I remember I did see a little clip of it on TV, or maybe like during one of those like free HBO weekends, if you remember that, Jay. And I just remember like Dennis Hopper going into like a chainsaw store and having like chainsaws everywhere. And I was like, what the hell is this? Like, and that's the only thing I remember was that was a little scene. So yeah, it was a hard movie to find, believe it or not. We had to get it on Apple iTunes, the only place available to rent it legally. And watched it. Took me a couple times to get through, but we'll get to it. But just saw it.
Well, like I say, I had seen it once before, and then I had heard a lot of people talking about it because I think as film, or I wanted to make a distinction here. There's film Twitter and then there's movie Twitter, and I tend to hang out more in movie Twitter because it's the fun part of that. But anyway, I think movie Twitter has given this thing a different life and more of a. There's a phenomenon of like going back and reappreciating things that maybe got panned at one time for what they are. And I'm neither here nor there on that. You like what you like or you don't like it.
Jay, it strikes me a lot of times when people like to like elevate things that you don't think need to be elevated. It's kind of like Five Guys burgers. Like if you ever hear like people talk about like Five Guys, before you ever go there, they sit there like, oh, it's the best hamburger you can get. It's great, whatever. And you go there and you're like, that's it?
It's actually just a lot of fries.
Yeah, just like it's not bad, but I've had better before, and it's
certainly
just
for the price too.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things. I think people almost it's like a snowball effect. I think like you get a couple people that really really like it, and then other people are like, ooh, maybe I missed something, and they're just kind of wanting to be part of the crowd. I'm not trying to like show my hand here, but I kind of feel like this is kind of one of those. those.
Well, you had mentioned that are there other horror sequels that just go completely different? And I thought of two that did it, two big franchises that did this. Friday the 13th did this with Part 5, The New Beginning, which I've heard dubbed as like the bad direction, the wrong idea, and that movie is bad, but so good, so bad it's good, in a way for me. You can hear Ron and I review it way back in, but it's not a good Friday the 13th movie. Because it doesn't have Jason. It's a whole different story. They just replaced the character. And the other one I would say is Halloween 3, which just has nothing to do with anything in that series.
Well, Halloween, I feel like they kind of reinvent. I wouldn't say like go a completely different genre, but there's many different feels in that franchise from like 5.
Well, they were trying to go in a different direction. They just picked the wrong way to do it. Because that movie's actually, I like that movie. Because it owes itself so much to something like Invasion of the Body Snatchers from the 50s, which I love.
I still think I should have been on the Halloween Noir's perspective because we would have had some very interesting conversations because I really only appreciate a handful of those. But anyways, but for me, I mean, definitely when you look at like completely different genres, I mean, or subgenres being interjected into it. I mean, Aliens is probably one where it went from, sci-fi horror to sci-fi horror action, or whatever. Movie, yeah. I mean, and then Evil Dead, like I brought up before, where, it went from basically a grindhouse that you can watch it again, kind of like the first Texas Chainsaw, and kind of see some comedic elements that maybe were unintended or intended, depending on when you ask the director. But then the sequel goes completely like, balls to the wall crazy and stuff like that. But I think Evil Dead 2 would probably be the movie I've seen that is most comparable to this.
I think you're right. That's a good comparison. And just to circle back on Aliens real quick, that whole film series is a whole set of genre. You've got haunted house in space with the first one, it's a horror movie. Then you've got an action movie, a war movie, the second movie. And then the third movie, you've got a drama, right? And then the fourth movie, you got a horror comedy. And then the fifth and the sixth movies, if you count AVP and AVPRs,
I don't.
You got the, well, I do. And you got the splatter movies. And then you've got the Ridley movies, which are like the elevated horror movies. And, and then you got the action horror return, which is requel, whatever we want to call those nowadays with Covenant. And who knows if they'll ever make another one, at this point.
I have forgotten Covenant even exists, to be honest with you. Until you just said that, I'm like, oh my God, there was one after Prometheus.
It's funny you mentioned that, though, because this movie to me, because I had seen it before, but I remembered almost nothing about it. Unlike the last one where we talked about, like, I saw it once and I felt like I could have just told you about it without even rewatching it. And this one, I feel like this movie is like a Mission Impossible tape. It self-destructs as you watch it. Like, you just none of it lands in my head. And it's not that it's bad. I'm not saying that. It's just something about this is happening in front of me and I realize the absurdity of it means I'm not taking any of it seriously, so I don't remember any of it.
It kind of has also kind of bring up sequels, so it kind of almost has like Hills Have Eyes 2 vibe to it. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Yeah, I've seen that, yeah.
Yeah, where it's just it's just strange. But anyway, why don't you talk about kind of how it self-destructs as it goes through there, Jay?
Yeah, okay, so I got so many things to talk about with this plot. So much like the last one, I'm not going to go through like a point by point, because the plot is pretty darn simple in this one, even though it is insanely absurd.
I'm actually really curious as to what the plot is, because I don't know what it is.
There's these two guys. Wikipedia will tell you they're high school students. They're not. They're the yuppies in college, because they're really rich. But they're driving to the OU Texas football game, which is a huge deal for everyone involved. And they call into a radio station in pure yuppie style to talk to a disc jockey wannabe journalist named Stretch. And for some reason, Stretch's radio station, the phone only works one way. She doesn't have a dump button, which means she can't drop the call. So they're on the call the whole way as they almost run a truck off the road, who catches up to them later. And we find out Leatherface and a new character named Chop Top, who's the brother of the hitchhiker. So they had another brother, in there, and the dad, Drayton Sawyer, are driving the truck and they attack, and she catches all of this on the radio, and it's played, it's part of the investigation. It becomes like this big, viral moment for 1986. And one of the people that hears it is the uncle of Sally and Franklin Hardesty from the first movie, an ex-Texas lawman played by Dennis Hopper named Lefty. I don't know why he's Lefty, because he does everything with his right hand. We'll get there. But he's on a mission. He's been on a mission for 12 years to find this murderous group. And so he goes and buys a bunch of chainsaws instead of buying guns, because I would imagine there's more guns in Texas than chainsaws, but okay. So he's on one trail, and The Sawyer family, as we find out, have not only abandoned their old homestead, but they have become award-winning barbecuists around the state of Texas and doing their special brand of barbecue. They're winning awards, they're making money, and they are living at an old abandoned amusement park where they have their whole macabre set up again. So they hear about the radio call and they go to the radio station and take out Stretch's producer and kidnap her. And well, they kidnap her because Leatherface is supposed to kill her, but she kind of teases him, or maybe not. I don't know. He looks like he's having a moment with her. We'll get there. But they end up taking her back to the park and Lefty's following the whole way. So in the end, Lefty goes chainsaw to chainsaw with Leatherface. He ends up cutting Drayton Sawyer pretty badly, who grabs a grenade off of the corpse of the old hitchhiker. And when Grandpa misses the throw with the hammer that hits Leatherface, he's already been impaled with one chainsaw. It sets the grenade off, which blows up the whole smash. But Stretch and Chop Top are still going at each other. They race to the top of, I think, what is like a roller coaster mountain or something. I don't know. But they get into a fight, and at the top of that is Grandma's corpse with a chainsaw in her lap. So Stretch gets the chainsaw, cuts up Chop Top. He falls to his death, and Stretch does a dance for the ages on top of this mountain of insanity. And that is the plot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Very strange, very strange, very strange. Yeah.
Yeah.
So interesting.
I mean, the opening bit, and I think this is comedy for sure. And what Tobe Hooper, if we were talking about last time, was people hanging on to the past in a town that progress was passing by, right? This time he's definitely taking a big jab at the stuff that we made fun of in St. Elmo's Fire, the yuppie culture. Because these two dudes driving this Mercedes to this ball game are shooting guns, they're drinking in the car. It's the typical, rednecks with money, Texas situation, going to a football game. How more American can you get, or at least American stereotype can you get than this? They got a car phone, they're listening to their jamming tunes, and they're not paying attention to the road. I mean, was that guy supposed to be Ducky? I don't know. It was a good one. He could have.
I mean, I look at the circle glasses, which were very aesthetic of the '80s and everything, and then I don't know. I mean, it's so hokey the way the guys are acting, and I guess it's Texas. They're shooting signs with the gun and stuff, and apparently they're really good at shooting that, but they're not shooting good at people sitting right next to them. But I just find it funny because it's like they're calling into the radio station, and then I don't know what that engine in that truck is, man, but he can sure keep up with a car going in reverse on a bridge. I mean,
I'm sitting there looking. I was like, okay, that's definitely a 350, Hemi, and that Mercedes has got a decent engine. That's at least a straight six. So the chase on the bridge is insane because when we first see Leatherface, and it's a new person, Bill Johnson replaces Gunnar Hansen, and he's similar build, but a little different. He's a little taller, I think, but he's just got a different look, but he's playing a different character.
He feels soft, like he looks softer.
He's much more Stay Puft Marshmallow, I agree. But when you first see him, you see this dancing corpse situation going on. We'll find out they've just kept the old hitchhiker's body around, which that is one of the most hilarious props I've seen in a movie in a long time. That they just dragged this mannequin thing, which we should say, Tobe Hooper came back for this. Did all of he didn't do any of his fancy tricks that he had last time, but he's got a different, cinematographer, but he got Tom Savini, who's big makeup effects guy, horror legend at this point, and he got Savini to do all the makeup stuff for this. And they clearly are like, we're gonna do this as a complete farce. And it doesn't have to make sense because it's all going to be about getting people from action point to action point. But that chase on the bridge, there's just so many things about it that I can sit here and nitpick to death, particularly the part that they're on the phone with the radio station and Stretch is telling them, like, you got to hang up. You're hanging up the line. I'm like, every radio station has the dump button. Like you even see the engineer like pulling wires out for no reason, LG. And I'm like, what is he disconnecting headphones for? Like that, you can drop a call. But if you just let it ride for that, it's the hilarious inciting incident is when Leatherface cuts apart the, rag top and then cuts that guy's head in half and he's still driving.
Yeah, I mean, didn't she kind of say in the movie that she wanted to be a reporter and everything?
Yes, she wants to be a reporter, but she's working as a DJ, which, as someone who worked in communications, you should start wherever you can. So I get it.
Yeah, but to me, it's like, I think it would have been better if she would have been like, maybe the guy's trying to dump the call and she's like, don't, let's get this on here because something's going on.
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, just to kind of, be like, I'm a reporter. I want to be able to get the evidence. I want to, because that's what reporters are supposed to do. But yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting setup on this bridge and stuff. I was actually, I'm not sure if you ever seen some of the deleted scenes for this, but there's also there's a deleted scene, I think, for the beginning of this where, as they're talking about they're going to this football game. Mm-hmm. I think what it was Leatherface actually runs into the football team and he actually massacres the entire football team with a chainsaw. Which actually, for a movie called Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it would be nice if he killed more people with chainsaws.
Oh, he kills a lot of people with chainsaws in this movie, though.
I think he could still kill some more. I mean, he kills, Robert Downey Jr. looking guy or whatever.
And Ducky.
And Ducky with it. And then of course, you got the little blood squirts, with the little tubes coming
out.
Oh, yeah. Which is totally 80s.
Well, it's total Tom Savini, though. And this one I realized, I was like, oh, this is a completely different kind of movie. But because it's so farcical, I do say again, like I'm having to remember this because you had to write down a lot of notes about it because it's not like I have pictures of this in my head. Unlike the last one, which was so evocative the way it looked.
Yeah.
This one is, it's just different. And unlike, Return of the Living Dead or Evil Dead 2, which there's memorable pieces of that. Like I can remember scenes from those movies right now, and haven't seen them in years. But this one, there's something about it that I think it's because it's juxtaposed to having just watched the first one again recently that it's just such a left turn. But I have to remind myself too, like it had been 12 years and home video had just become a thing. So I wonder how many people really remembered Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Obviously Golden and Globus did because they wanted to cash in on it. But you wonder how many people in the audience maybe went to see this and were confused by it. I don't know if people would have had the memory recall like we do now with it.
They may not have, and the video market really wasn't, a big thing back at that time when this movie came out. It was just coming, I don't even think Blockbuster was around at that time, or at least it wasn't what it was in the 90s. But the name had cachet, I think, and again, this is coming from someone who really was, I don't even think I was in grade school during this time. I think you were graduating from college. So
no, I wasn't. I was in grade school too. So, but yeah, same diff. I mean, it is a very different time, but it's in that sweet spot of horror before horror completely hits the gut.
Well, but like I was saying though, I think the name Texas Chainsaw Massacre was something that people knew. Yeah. Whether they knew the first one or remembered it, they still remembered that name. So. Yeah. Not as well, looking at the box office. But
it still made money. I mean, it made money, but it was different. But we talked about they replaced Leatherface. They bring back Jim Sydow again as Drayton Sawyer as the head of the clan, and I kind of dug him. He's just really hamming it up in this movie, and he clearly knew what kind of movie he was in. But the person who really knew what they were in is Bill Moseley. That was a golden moment to cast him as this, and apparently he got the role because he did some sort of a bit as the hitchhiker from Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it got in the hands of Tobe Hooper and Kim Hinkle, the writers, and they're like, oh, we got to have this guy. And I mean, horror legend now, he's been in a lot of stuff. Rob Zombie loves him, and you can see why. I mean, the dude he clearly knows what kind of movie he's in, and he is the best part of this thing completely.
Oh, by far. I mean, and Dennis Hopper's not bad either. And I think both of their introductions, like their proper introductions in the movie, are pretty good. Like I said, with, Dennis Hopper and, his whole, like, oh, I'm the uncle. I mean, you got to get that little family relationship there. But I think even with Chop Top, what was kind of cool with him is, like, when he first meets Stretch, how he's taking that coat hanger and he's taking the lighter to heat it up, and then he's, like, scratching his head or something like that. I thought that was kind of I could totally see him being the one that's like, I should do this with a metal plate. I'm scratching my head right here because, I got the scab and it feels good to do that, something like that. And I thought that was kind of an interesting thing, but a very, very memorable. Like, I get I've only seen this movie, just recently, but I think if, ask me in a year what I remember, it's going to be that scene with Chop and the lighter.
So. Oh, yeah, no, I mean, everything he's doing in there is intentional, you can tell. Like, this is someone that, I don't think that character was written that way. I think he made that a thing just by being, off-kilter kind of guy. I mean, he just sort of has a different sense of humor, and clearly he knew what kind of movie he was in. I don't know that Dennis Hopper knew where he was in this.
Oh, no, he was coked out of his mind.
This was the 80s, yeah. So
he probably didn't even know what movie he was making. He's like, show up here and be a cop, all right, cool. And then he probably thought it was going to be something like, Carlito's Way or some shit like that. And then also it's like, nah, Texas Chainsaw. You're not going to have guns. You're going to have chainsaws.
I know, yeah, can we talk about him, like his whole thing? Because we do get an opening crawl again. It's not John Larroquette. I forget who voices this time. I don't think it's anybody of note, at least that I remember. But we find out that like the family abandoned the farmhouse and that they never found the bodies of Franklin, but Sally, you know, got in the hospital, gave a statement, and then went catatonic. And so she's off over here, and so we don't know what happens. But there's been all these strange chainsaw murders around the state, and nobody knows. And they're still setting into that mystery. And I thought, well, I guess if you're going to try to pay homage to the original thing and you want to follow it up, you need to pay into that. You need to tell people where they're going, what they're doing. Mm-hmm. But holy cow. The other thing is when we meet the Sawyers and they're at the big barbecue festival and they're winning the award or whatever, mm-hmm. that was hilarious. Because what you realize is like these people are praising this award-winning barbecue, but they don't realize they're eating people. Like that's the joke.
Soylent Green, man, it's people, right? So
yeah, except it looks a lot tastier than Soylent Green.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like I said. Everything right now is it's funny, mm-hmm. and it's meant to be funny, which is again, I think for me because I saw these movies so close together, that's the part I'm having trouble with right now is just the complete U-turn that the franchise has done right now with, you know, kind of being more comical and funny. I mean, mm-hmm. everything is just, like I said, just kind of turned up to 11 as far as how everybody's acting and stuff, which is good. You know, I'm glad to see that a lot of them really knew what type of movie they were in and, you know, not like Dennis Hopper doesn't know where he is, but, yeah, I mean, it's just definitely a different feel right now.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, the movie, for everybody knowing what they're doing, and we got to give Caroline Williams some credit here, too. This is an actress who's worked for decades.
I thought it was Laura Metcalf at first.
Laurie Metcalf. You thought it was, Roseanne's sister on the show.
They got a similar look.
It's the haircut. That's all it is. But she has a very interesting arc in this film, if there is such a thing as an arc in this, because she's this would-be reporter or whatever. She's got this funky nickname that they never bother to explain. I guess you said probably because she's kind of tall or whatever. But she runs around in like, you know, Daisy Dukes the whole movie because, yes, that's what you do. I guess because it's hot in Texas. I'm just going to go with that. And there are several scenes where I'm not really sure that they wanted to go whole hog the way they were going with it. And particularly when they attack the radio station. And Leatherface goes after her, and she's sitting there like her back's against the wall, her legs are spread, and he's got that chainsaw like right at her. And I'm like, at one point, like the way he's sort of, you know, bouncing around, it's like, is Leatherface like getting turned on and like going to try to screw this chick with this chainsaw? Because that's like, it's funny because it's supposed to be funny, but it's also kind of horrific and weird. And I've seen people, you know, write that like, oh, she's using her, you know, femininity to tame him. And I'm like, I don't think that's what's happening here. I think she was just freaking out, ready to die.
Yeah, I'm taking it more or less as kind of a commentary on like gun culture in Texas, you know, and like instead of being guns, it's you know, chainsaws in this. I mean, when you see Dennis Hopper go to the chainsaw store, which I've been to Harbor Freight.
If you have two metaphors for the penis, though, I think we're losing the message.
Yeah, but I think that's what it is, though. Is I think it's kind of like how a lot of people say like guns are, you know, a phallic thing, and that's how some people see as an extension of that. And I think in a way, it's kind of like, well, we're going to say that, but with chainsaws as opposed to gun because it's Texas Chainsaw, and that's the whole thing. I mean, you can't take it any other way. The chainsaw with his dick. That's how he's seeing it. That's what he used. It's his tool, and that's what it was because. Yeah, and that's just it's very strange because even after he did, like he's sitting there with a chainsaw and everything, like he's totally doing like phallic stuff with it. So,
well, I mean, you got to think too the chainsaw in the first movie was just like a real chainsaw. It's like it's just a standard issue chainsaw.
You got like 2 feet long ones.
The one he's got is like what you see on like ESPN2 and they don't have any other sports to show is like the lumberjack competitions, which are fun to watch by the way. But there's those huge long blades, you know, and stuff, and I'm like all the chainsaws in this movie, instead of gun porn, it's chainsaw porn. You know, and when Lefty's in the chainsaw store, which I guess is supposed to be the gun store, you know, metaphor or whatever, but there's all these different sizes. And he's got 2 holstered. He's got the big one too. But yeah, Leatherface attacks with the big tool.
And what year did this come out?
This came out in 1986, so it was made in 85.
So yeah, I mean, right during that time, I mean, you had the gun movies and everything. You know, you had Rambo. I don't think Commando had come out yet, but it was something that was definitely in the cinema at the time. Was the larger than life guys with, you know, never reload and got all these guns and going to take out the bad guys. And it's the same thing, but I think that's kind of what they're trying to play on here is like, instead of it being like Arnold with this armed and guns everywhere, it's going to be these guys who got chainsaws everywhere.
Yeah, and people talk about like, oh yeah, that's a total Golden Globes thing. It should be noted, they hated this. Like when they would see the dailies on this, they were like frightened. They were like, this is no, we wanted you to make a horror movie. And somehow Tobe Hooper was able to like satiate them enough with what he would tell them versus what actually got edited and cut together.
I have to ask you though, did he say a reason why he went in this direction at all? Because it just seems very weird that you have a movie that you're known for, and and then you're going to come back and then you go take it in a completely different direction. Has he said why?
He was going to produce it initially, but he couldn't find a director that would work on the budget that they had. So he's like, well, okay, fine, I'll do it. But his entire thing was he wanted to make it a comedy because he didn't feel like there was anything left to do on the horror side that wouldn't be aping what was going on at the time, which was Friday the 13th. I think Nightmare on Elm Street was in its hay run. It's before Halloween, got back into the game. But it was all the other horror movies that were happening at the time. He didn't feel like there was anything else that he could do that wouldn't just be exploitative. So he said, well, if we're going to be exploitative, let's be dark comedy. And so that was what he wanted to do. And then, like, again, Cannon and Golden Globus were like, no, this is not what we were signed up for. But apparently he was able to get it by him because, if you've been around and know anything about the Cannon films, they weren't exactly had their hands on the switch sometimes. So they weren't totally in control of what's going on. But yeah, that's why he decided to do it. And it's also why they didn't get Gunnar Hansen back. They wanted to pay him scale. And, they went relatively cheap. $4.5 million is not a lot of money for a movie like this in 1986. And it was always his intention to go comedy because he didn't feel like there was anything else to do horrifically.
I mean, it's almost kind of getting me kind of like a Wes Craven feel when he came back and he did, what was that awful one? The one that he did where Freddy came into the real world.
New Nightmare?
Or something. Where
meta?
I gotta
proto scream?
Yeah, I gotta go do something completely different here or something like that, like reinvent the wheel. I don't know.
It'd be more like Shocker for Wes Craven, but
yeah. But I'm just saying within the same franchise. Just how if you watch that first Nightmare on Elm Street and then watch that one, it's just like, what? Like this feels completely different.
Well, it's supposed to. It's supposed to be that there was a movie and then this is the real world. That's the joke of New Nightmare.
It sucked. I don't know. So.
Well, it's been, again, that one's in the archives. You can listen to Brian and I talk about that one. But it's got its moments, but it's just as batshit crazy as this movie is. That's for sure.
Oh, totally.
And yeah, but that's the thing here is you get that big opening kill, you get Lefty investigating the kill. And I love Dennis Hopper because Dennis Hopper can really only do like two things at this point acting wise and just be really intense and earnest like a preacher or something like an Ernest Ainsley type or whatever. I got a real laugh out of that because growing up in the South, I knew that archetype.
I got to bring it up again, though. Another sequel that changed. Gremlins 2. That's the one I've been thinking about. It's been on the tip of my tongue.
That is exactly right, because Joe Dante did the same thing. He said, there's nothing else to do horrifically here. We're going to make a commercialism exploitation movie because that's the only reason this movie's getting made anyway.
Yep.
And Tobe Hooper felt the same way about this one. It's like the only reason they're doing this is because they know it'll cash right now, or they think it will. And it did. I mean, it made money, so it had a following, even though it got panned. But horror movies never get anything by credit. It's only recently that people think, oh, horror movies are cool in critic circles and stuff. Like Ebert was always going to dump on this. Even though I'll say some of his criticism is not entirely unwarranted, this movie's incredibly uneven and it's kind of flat.
Well, it's not only that, but like some of the dialogue.
Oh, it's horrendous. Yeah.
I'm like, what did she say? Like, there's like a scene later in the movie where like he's chasing her with a chainsaw and then she's like, all right, I can't do this anymore. And like, but I'm just like, what? Like,
I kind of felt like that was the actress saying, I need a break. Like,
yeah. I mean, it's almost like if you ever text somebody, you got like that predictive text on your phone.
Yeah.
It's like typing a word and then keep on clicking the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one. That's like how they wrote this script if it would have been like today where it's just like, it's all predictive text that makes no sense.
I can only think, because it is Tobe Hooper and it's his friend Kim Hinkle, there was a lot of weed involved.
Oh, no, I think there was a lot of coke involved in this.
I don't think they were coke guys. I think they were definitely weed guys. Like I don't think Tobe and his crew. Now Dennis Hopper was a coke guy, but
I've smoked weed before. I've never sat there and did like anything like this.
Well, it can make you paranoid too. I mean, there's two reactions.
But even like
Tobe was just cool.
But even towards like the end of the movie, like where the grandpa's like doing like his monologue about the grenade and stuff, I'm like, none of this makes any sense. Like what he's saying.
The Drayton, yeah. Well, okay. Look, I've dropped it before too. I did get genuine chuckles every time they drag out. They call him Nubbins, the corpse of the.
He's like a ventriloquist dummy in this movie.
Yes, and they each take time wearing him. Like Chop Top will wear him sometimes, like on his back, like C-3PO in Empire Strikes Back, which I think that's exactly what Tobe Hooper's riffing. And then Leatherface will wear him as like a facade in the front, and then he'll come out with the chainsaw behind it, like it's a vaudeville act.
Yeah, they're just involving their dead brother. You know, it's
right.
Yeah, but the funny thing is like I think they still act like he's alive or whatever.
But they put a feeding tube in his mouth.
Yeah, I think it's just like part of their psychosis or whatever. It's like they don't really like understand death in a way like the way normal people are because they're completely insane.
Now, this movie does lean heavy into the gore because, again, you got Tom Savini, so you're going to do that. And I think the first big scene of that you get, besides the brain cut in the opening, I think when he kills Buzz and I think Eric's the other kid's name, is the radio station when they Chop Top beats LG with a hammer like several times. Who's the producer or the engineer for Stretch at the radio station, and then they start. Leatherface comes in with a. It's not even a chainsaw. It's one of those electric knives that like you cut a ham with, and he's just sawing off his leg meat, and he's sawing off his skin, and he saws off part of his face, and he wears part of the face, or he puts the face on Stretch. And it was pretty gross, And then when he comes back to life and kind of frees her temporarily or whatever, and she tries to put his face back on him when he dies. That was pretty like gnarly looking stuff.
Yeah, definitely some weird scenes in here and everything like that. But definitely, it's just funny with like Leatherface as far as like how he treats the masks and the people's face and everything. Like I said, you can obviously tell he's special, so to speak, and. It's just kind of his way of, I think it was his way of flirting with her, Now, I'm going to ask you with this, with Stretch being the leading lady, would you have rather seen Sally come back from the first one to take on this family a la Ripley, or are you glad it went in a different direction with different characters who are loosely tied?
No, I like the idea that they wrote her out as someone who had a complete mental breakdown because of this. Because that's what's happening at the end of that first movie, and I sort of appreciated that. I don't think I wanted her to come back. I would have been good if nobody came back except obviously the cannibal family, because that's what you do in a horror movie. You bring back a different set of people. If you bring people one sequel to the next, they usually get killed pretty quick. Nightmare and Halloween both did that. Friday the 13th did that. So it's rare to have people continue anyway. So no, I didn't need her to come back. I didn't think the Sally character was this Ripley type character or Laurie Strode or any of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not missing her either here. I'm glad that they went in a different direction, but I'm just still surprised by the direction that they went into. And even like, when, now we have like Dennis Hopper. I brought before like this chainsaw store, which is something that was just ingrained in my head just because I saw that bit when I was a kid. And then him, tracking him down to the, to the abandoned theme park and everything. And, it's just, I don't know. It's just interesting the next stuff that happens.
Well, when we do talk about their layer,
how does he not have a gun? Is what I'm getting at here. I'm trying to politely say that. Is like I'm trying to like segue into that. I'm like, how does a Texas lawman not bring a freaking gun? And I get it. Like they're trying to have fun. It's phallic. It's also commentary on gun culture. But it's like you could have ended this just with a freaking six shot.
Well, yeah, you could have got the gun from the kid that you couldn't hit anything with. I took it as this, just from a character motivation, is that obviously Lefty is completely unhinged, at some point. So he's like, the only way to fight fire is with fire. And so he's going to go take out the chainsaw murderers with a chainsaw. I think that's the narrative reason why. It's ridiculous, but it is kind of funny. It leads into the humor as to why that works.
Did Rob Zombie borrow this for the sequel, The House of a Thousand Corpses?
Probably.
Remember, what's his name?
Captain Satan?
No, the brother of the cop going after them.
Yes.
Yeah, you remember he brings in like the unholy duo, Diamond Dallas Page.
Yes, no, I can totally. Rob Zombie borrows lots of things from Texas Chainsaw Massacres. It won't be the last time I mention that, by the way. When we get to those prequels, we'll get into that again because he could be sued. I think for the way that got done. But anyway,
it's always funny what's considered to be plagiarism, what's considered to be an homage.
In Hollywood, it's pretty much always plagiarism at this point. So let's just be honest. But no matter what studio you're working out of. But in this case, the thing that is so different is you remember that last movie, it was all shot in the daylight, right? Mm-hmm. And we talked about like all the starkness of it. It was done for horrific effect, all the bone sculptures and, taxidermies and all that kind of stuff. And this movie, though, when they're in that carnival place, there's the same setup. They got bones hanging everywhere. They got furniture, all this stuff. but there's all these neon carnival lights, and it's like this completely sort of goofy funhouse feel to it. It's like they got a little money and they kind of leaned into we'll just use the lights in the funhouse here, and it's ridiculous.
Well, I think it's because the movie is kind of just like a funhouse in a way.
It is a funhouse, yeah.
Yeah, it's like you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know what door you're going to go through. I mean, it's silly. It's silly like a funhouse. It's not even like a spook house. It is. It's just a straight up funhouse.
Oh, it's a straight spook house though, because it's the jokey kind of spook house. Because when Lefty arrives there and he sees that wall bleeding a little bit, and he punches a hole through it, all the guts start pouring out. Because you realize like this is where they make the special barbecue from the prime meat, but they got to get rid of the waste, right? And so they just sort of stick it behind this wall because that's what these cannibals would do, because you don't let anything go to waste, right? And there's no refrigeration in Texas, as we've already established from the last movie. So, yeah.
All these lights, they obviously have an electrical source, but they don't go and buy a chest freezer.
Well, I mean, nobody's billing them for it either, apparently. Like, you shut down the carnival, but, it's still getting power. I mean, I don't know.
I know Texas is a big place, but obviously if there's a theme park there's probably people not too far away. You just don't build that stuff in the middle of nowhere.
I took that completely as like the psycho trope that like the highway went somewhere else, so it took everybody away.
Yeah.
Walmart came to town, Nick, and it ruined everything.
I just imagine, have you ever seen like the pictures of like the New Orleans, like Six Flags after Katrina? It's still abandoned. It's still, So who knows? Maybe we got some Louisiana Chainsaw Massacre. I don't know.
I highly doubt that, but yeah, maybe Saints fans, but that which is nearly the same. But yeah, this whole setup though with the family dynamic is different, because last time they were all psychotic together, and so when they recreate the dinner scene here, last time that was a torture scene. That is the essence of torture porn, if you want to call it that. Even though it doesn't really go that horrific, it's just the setup is what you think you hear and see. It makes it worse. This one, they're like, well, you know what? We're going to do the Saturday Night Live spoof of that. And it's almost like samurai clothes dryer or whatever. It's that kind of joke. And I didn't realize that, I think, the first time I saw this movie. Because I'll be honest, I did not like this the first time I watched it. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is so dumb. And so I moved on. Watching it again this time, I'm like, okay, I know what they're trying to do. And yes, the dialogue is horrendous. So there's times unless you can just mute it and you don't even have to listen to what they're saying. You just watch what's going on. But when they recreate that dinner scene, I got to tell you, there's some good comedy in there. Like they clearly are, like, they're doing the same angles and the same people are talking at the right time and stuff, but it's all played for like a huge joke instead of being this, torture scene where they're going to kill this girl.
Yeah, everything at this point's a joke. I mean, even we got a scene of Dennis Hopper going through the catacombs and he comes apart a skeleton in a wheelchair. And of course,
Franklin!
It's got to be Franklin from the first one.
Yeah.
Because apparently the family went and grabbed him before they left and like, we're bringing this guy with us.
I mean, he was a big guy. There was some meat on Franklin. He was just bones when they saw him.
Maybe they harvested him, for some brisket.
Oh, I think they definitely did. Like,
they fattened him up. So.
But the battery and the flashlight still work. They don't make them like they used to.
No, they don't. They don't. I don't get anything to last more than 6 months, but apparently that can last 12 years.
So, right? So it probably hadn't been on in a while, but even then.
But I gotta laugh though. It's so like over the top schmaltzy and stuff. Totally just played for that. Like, oh, Franklin,
poor Franklin. I know. Yeah, and I love how Lefty calls Stretch sister all the time. I don't know why he does that. Maybe it's a Dennis Hopper thing.
I can totally see it being a Dennis Hopper thing. Being like,
yeah.
After he does a line of coke or two, he's like, I'm going to call her sister throughout the movie. And they're like, why? He goes, that's just my thing. I'm just going to call her sister.
I don't think anybody asked that question you just stated, but nobody said why. I thought Hoover's like,
no, he's just talking to himself. I'm not saying that anybody's talking to him. He's probably just looking in the mirror like, going to call her sister. And he probably asked himself that question. So
when he shows up to confront them, though, that is some gold. When the way he goes after Drayton Sawyer and he cuts him right in the ass. And I mean, like, he gets this, Drayton gets this whole monologue, like, he took care of my hymns. I don't have to go to the hospital now. I mean, it should be horrific. And in another movie in this series, that will happen, that kind of thing. And you'll see all the splatter, gore, and awful you want to see. But in this one, man, it is a total joke. And I'm not going to lie, I was laughing, man. The last 20 minutes of this movie are bonkers. And I laughed the whole time.
Oh, yeah. I think everybody was on drugs at this point because, it's like kind of like Star Wars where it's like, you gotta have to duel at the end. Well, they're going to duel with a chainsaw. And they both got, 30-inch blade chainsaws going back and forth. And purposely hitting each other with a chainsaw, not even trying to really hit each other at first because you got to have a little bit of a show. And then he's got like 2 smaller chainsaws, like sidearms.
He impales Leatherface with that one, and he's like straight through him and guts everywhere. Of course, good Tom Savini stuff. But Leatherface is still coming. You know, and what's funny is Grandpa's still there. So they got the Grandpa character back, and he stands up in this movie. I know he can still stand. And he's trying to throw that hammer, and he's just as bad at aim with it because he hits Leatherface with it while Lefty's standing there with those two chainsaws, and that sets off an explosion. We've got to talk about how the explosion gets set up, though, because Drayton's underneath the table, and he grabs, get down here, boy. He grabs the old hitchhiker. He's like, show me where your F-off Charlie is. And he's all these nicknames for the grenade, right? And which is an homage to the actor that had played in the other one had been in Vietnam. So they were doing a little wink and a nod there. But he's still got a live pineapple grenade. And I'm like, boy, that lasted after 12 years too. I thought gunpowder lost its fuse at some point, but I guess not.
Yeah, when he throws that hammer and he misses him, I'm like, is that Justin Fields? No.
I mean, really though, he's standing there and he's going, I'll get the last laugh. And then Leatherface, of course, crashes through with his saw through there. He starts, sawing Drayton in half, and that's when he drops the grenade. And Dennis Hopper's, in full rage mode as he gets blown up. But
celebrating. Strongest grenade in the world, I guess.
It blew away everything except everything above them, which I'm not a demolition expert, but I'm sure you understand this because you've worked in construction. If you blow the lower level out from something, everything above it is coming down.
Yeah, you don't have the budget for that.
Yeah, so she's running up Space Mountain or whatever the hell this is supposed to be, and Chop Top.
I think it's like Splash Mountain.
Yeah, something like that. But they're running together, or the mountain that they used in the Price is Right game, that the little thing with the mountain climber would fall off the end of. But it looked like that too.
That's a deep cut.
Well, much like this movie. And so you get a great Chop Top scene here at the end, though. He breaks out the straight razor again. He keeps calling her this hog bitch. I just got to feel like that's a Bill Moseley, like, you come here, hog bitch. He's just coming after her. And he is cutting the hell out of her. But she comes upon this corpse, which if you don't hear his lines, you don't understand what it is. It's this female, obviously old, decrepit female corpse that has a beautiful chainsaw in its lap. So we're to believe that Grandma, everybody in this family is a chainsaw murderer except Drayton. Mm-hmm. And she's trying to crank that thing while he's, cutting her, limb from limb with that straight razor. And I didn't get what that was the first time I saw it, like the grandma thing, until I listened to it this time, and he's going, you killed Grandma. I'm like, I think she's been dead a little while, man. But obviously in his world, you're never really dead, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm just finding this whole thing kind of be rather anticlimactic after the whole Hopper duel of fates, down there, and him running after with a straight razor with her, and, she ends up, being able to get the better of him and, kicking him down the hill down there. I guess he's supposed to die?
I took it as that because she cuts him, in the middle and then kicks him over the ledge, and he falls down one of those big tubes that is, running trash down the hill, or I guess running the guts into the river or whatever that they're doing. Mm-hmm. So you assume he's dead. I guess in case they wanted to come back, they never will.
I'll bring that up later.
All right. But then you see Stretch do the dance at the end. And I'm like, if you, again, having watched these movies back to back pretty close, I'm like, she's doing the mock of the Gunnar Hansen dance. And I'm like, that's on purpose, right? And I looked it up, and Toby was like, yeah, I told her to do exactly that. And I'll give it to the actress. She goes for it, man.
Yeah, she's up there kind of, shaking back and forth with it and stuff. So, yeah, it's interesting.
It's a very weird way to end on that. And then it's just, boom, cut right into the black again. And I'm like, wow, that happened. And this, like I said, though, this movie self-erases because after you've watched it, you're like, well, what did I just see? And I guess that brings us to the point of the podcast where it's time to give final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings. So what are yours for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2?
For me, again, I'm just going to go with the medium popcorn. I enjoyed this one a little bit more than the first one, I have to say, just because it had to have some funny moments here. But I think just the whole, changing of the genre as much as they did really was kind of it was a lot. I had a little bit of whiplash, I could say, when it happened to that. But definitely, I probably enjoyed it a little bit more, but still not enough to give it a large popcorn. But one thing I did want to bring up, too, as we talked about Chop Shop, is actually he was they made a direct sequel to this movie about him that never came out.
I did not know that they made a Chop Top.
Yeah, and apparently like it's like halfway done or maybe all the way done, but it's something about the rights and whatever, and it was never able to come out.
Wait a minute. Yeah, this is the thing Toby Hooper's kid was working on.
Yeah, All American Massacre is what it was called.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it's supposed to take place like 13 years after the first one or after the second one. So I don't know. It's just interesting because that's the whole thing I brought up. Like, oh, did he die? Did he not? Apparently he didn't die, but it's a movie we won't see. And, be honest with you, with the stills I've seen, I don't need to see it.
I was going to say, yeah, I don't think there is anything there.
Even if it's 10 minutes, I don't need to see it.
I'm going to join you in that medium popcorn, but not in like a bad way. I think this movie is a complete cheese fest, and it's supposed to be, though. And in those moments when it's just being ridiculous is when it's best. It's in the moments in between when people are actually trying to carry on conversations and do stuff that it just loses me. Like, I'll be honest, like you can get up and vacuum and you walk the dog, go for a run and come back and just, as long as you pick up the next bit of absurdity, you're fine. Because there's nothing to know. Like the last movie was sort of stark and that's what kind of made it work. This one could be a little more stark and it would work better, I think. But I like the performers. I particularly like Mosley. I think Caroline Williams is fun in this too. Dennis Hopper's Crazy Dennis Hopper, which is a blast. Cause this is the same like year where he's doing My Science Project, where he's insane in that movie too. And, Roddy, I talked about that a while back. And I like the zaniness of this movie, but it's not great, but it's fun. And I see how it has built a cult audience. I think this is one of the times when movie Twitter found something and you said, no, everybody forgot, missed what this was really trying to do. And it would have stuck out like a sore thumb in 1986. So now I see why it's got an audience, why people dig it. I don't think it's better than the first one, but I can see why somebody who didn't just, love the first one would dig this one because it is such a far turn into Albuquerque and Looney Tunesville. So, but it's a fun one. So yeah, medium popcorn for me. Folks, as always, you can follow the show's social media at FilmStripPod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Go there, follow us, and you'll get updates about upcoming series. Ron usually runs the FilmStrip Twitter and is great about, interacting with folks and stuff. And if you follow him on Discord and on Dinner Geek and stuff, you can check out what he's got going on. Go to filmstrippodcast.com and you will link to our Anchor distribution site where everything is there. And you can also find a link to our Letterboxd page. Our Letterboxd page has the entire archives listed in order for you, or you can just go through your podcast feed on Apple, Google, or Spotify and see the 300 plus episodes we've got. Lots of different stuff in there. Nick and I've done together. Ron, Lindsay, and I've done together. Different guests the last few years, but we've had a big cast on Film Strip. Many who've retired from podcasting at this point, but lots of cool stuff there for you to check out. We'd appreciate it if you would, and if you can, leave us a 5-star review wherever you can. Share the show on your social media as it helps other people find the podcast. We do appreciate the support. So until next time, for Nick, I'm Jay. Thank you for listening to Film Strip.
Thank you for listening to Film Strip. You can find more episodes on our website, filmstrippodcast.com. The Film Strip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.